14,000 subscribers, man. Congratulations.
Yes, I am at I keep hovering right around 14,300 subscribers, I noticed today. Sometimes I'll go a little bit higher and then it'll go down. And I don't know if that's people unsubscribing. I think sometimes YouTube, the data, the way that it records the data, just takes time, and sometimes it kind of glitches and stuff. So I don't take that too seriously. All right, Jason and I are live.
We are back.
I hope. I think we are. So this is new to us. This is probably not going to go perfectly, but I've got my computer up here so I can watch and see if there's any live chats. It would be great to hear from people. If there's anybody watching, is anybody out there? Let us know. Don't be afraid to say hello in the chat. And Jason, can you see the video?
I can.
Okay.
I've already made commentary about what I think is going on.
Oh, look at this. Someone is agreeing that we are live. Thank you, Brad. That's good. Oh, and I'm wondering how this is going to go, because we've never done this. So are we going to get a lot of trolls in the comments?
Oh, man. Bring them on.
Any trolls? Jason will be answering trolly questions.
Absolutely.
And trolly comments. That's right. Man. And we got to be careful, Jason. We're normally we pre-record this and edit it a little bit. If someone says something that we want to edit out, we can't edit it out. Careful what you say. Careful.
Oh yeah, because I'm just a reprobate. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Well, we know we have at least one person watching the live stream. While we get started here, we are going to talk about the Coates situation in Edmonton, Canada at GraceLife Church. We're also going to talk a little bit about Pastor Pawlowski, his situation, a lot of stuff happening in Canada. But I'm going to first start with a very important matter, Jason, my MLB Hat Collection.
Please.
And thanks to my viewers, as you can see, I have a lot of the MLB hats now that have been sent to me. And there are two here that are, they're like green check marks. And that's because these two teams, people have told me they're going to send me these hats, but I haven't received them yet. So those are pending. But the red check marks, I definitely have those hats. And Jason and I were talking about this before we went live. If I can get this Twins hat here, I've got a row done. I get bingo. So I'm
Mets hat you would have bingo as well. You'd actually.
Yeah. Like I told you, I'm not worried about the Mets hat. If that never comes in, oh well. I mean, I'm a Phillies fan, in case anybody didn't know. So it's going to be really hard for me to wear a Mets hat, but I'm willing to do it for my audience. I am willing to do it.
I love it.
Oh man. All right. So what fans do we have out there? I'm curious if anybody is watching and you want to type in the chat if you're rooting for any baseball teams. Love to hear. Now, I am wearing the hat that is appropriate for our discussion tonight, the Toronto Blue Jays here, because we're going to be talking about Canada. And I think a lot of people know, as I've been talking about it, other people have been talking too, that GraceLife Church is a church in Edmonton, that area that, as this article says, has become the center of Alberta's COVID-19 fight. And we've talked about it too, Jason. They're a church that has continued to meet. They haven't really followed their local health orders because they want to continue to worship freely, but also they just felt that the government really was overstepping its bounds in the way it was handling the whole situation.
Yeah.
Jason has actually had the opportunity, I think it was yesterday, to interact some with Pastor Coates' wife, Erin.
Yeah.
And you wrote to her on Instagram, and it was really interesting because you got to kind of hear firsthand how they're looking at the situation. So tell us some about that. How did that interaction go?
Well, it was Erin Coates is extremely gracious. She answered every question I had. She gave more information than I even knew that I needed to know. I did invite her onto the show. She was busy today, and so was James Coates. But they didn't sound like they weren't interested in coming on. So hopefully next time we'll be able to have them on. But back to the conversation. She was extremely gracious. I just admitted to her, hey, I'm a Yankee from down south, and I do not understand Canada, their politics and such like that. And she really shed a lot of light on the situation, because many of you know James Coates' court case was this past week. It was only 2 days, and it was adjourned, and then the judge is going to come back with his decision in a couple of weeks. So with that case, I asked her about the situation with her husband, and if the situation with GraceLife being seized by Canada's government, are those coinciding? Do those go along with one another? And as such like that, I asked her that. Then, of course, what is it? If James is convicted, does that impact the property? Or if the property never comes back to you all, what does that do with, those kind of things? So she answered all those questions, and I'll go over those, of course. And then, of course, I asked her, like, who are the major players, because here in the United States, we understand government a little bit differently. You hear terms and names when we're talking about Canada that a lot of us don't even know. So she kind of explained that to me as well. So, but again, it was really good information, a really good conversation back and forth. So hopefully I can shed some light and maybe give a little bit of insight on this and help us know how to pray.
Awesome. Yeah. So you'll talk more about what she said specifically, but I do want to mention we do have some people that have written in the chat. It's delayed because it takes time for it to go through the live stream. Mm-hmm. But I see someone here says they were an Astros fan, but they live in the Tigers area now. So that's Detroit.
Okay.
So that's cool. Nice to have a Detroit Tigers fan. And also someone from the UK is watching. So hello over there across the pond. Great to have you with us. Awesome. So we're actually talking, this is a very international episode. We've got someone watching from the UK. We're talking about Canada. We live in the US. So what did she basically say is their situation that they're dealing with right now? Could you speak to anything that kind of jumped out at you as she talked about what they're going through?
Yes. So let's talk about James Coates. That's really what got this whole thing started, was James Coates and GraceLife Church's stance to stay open during the COVID lockdown pandemic. So the charges against James, she said is, and I'm just going to read this. I want to make sure I give her the proper, I don't want to Jasonize anything that she said. So the charge against James is a breach of Public Health Act. Our lawyers are fighting for this charge against the charter, our founding document. So the charters, from my understanding, is very similar to the US Constitution. So this is a violation on behalf of our health services. When you hear that term AHS a lot, AHS has been given full autonomy to create laws without having to pass them through legislation. So their democracy in Canada is very similar to ours in the United States. So their AHS is just able to make laws and decide what a law is and who's violating it and consequences, so on and so forth. So that's the situation. That's how James got into hot water, so to speak. Now, they are unelected officials that have been put into place by the premier. And the premier is Jason Kenney, not Jason Whitaker, but Jason Kenney. And their chief medical officer, her name is Dina Henshaw. So basically, she now runs the Providence, and I'm assuming she means the Providence of Edmonton and Alberta, Canada. And she has full weight of the law behind her. So this, and then Erin Coates goes into discussing about the seizure of the building. And I'll just, so that's what's going on with James. So the interesting thing with James, though, and I'll kind of summarize what she said, since this is a breach of health, this health mandate that they push, if he's convicted of it, it sets a precedent that basically their constitution or their charter doesn't matter. They can actually do this more and more. So there's a lot riding on this, not just GraceLife being able to worship, which I believe is essential and important, but there are some ramifications that if something else came down the pike in another year, some other kind of medical or health situation, they would use this as precedent to do the exact same thing again. Give the power over to the AHS and let them just run it however they see fit. So that was just my summary of that. But that's about James.
Okay. And I don't know if you mentioned it. They did actually start a court case, or they had some sort of a court case, and it was adjourned until June 7th, I believe. And then June 7th is when the judge is actually going to give a decision about whether James Coates' rights were infringed upon. Is that correct? And
that's what we're talking about. So the case, as I understand it correctly, was just like Monday and Tuesday. I guess the judge adjourned it, and he's going to come back with his decision on June 7th. So, definitely be praying that the judge makes the right decision there, because again, there's a lot weighing on it, way outside of just the church and the people of God being able to worship freely. There's a lot riding on that, the more you think about it.
Yeah, definitely. I did see here, by the way, you might be able to see it too, Jason. Robert said, we need more Jason and Tim podcasts. I like that. I'm glad to hear that someone's enjoying our conversations. That's really good to hear. I feel like we're very interesting, right, Jason? We're some of the most interesting people I know.
Clearly.
Yeah. So thank you for that summary. I think that's good. Now, she did describe Canada, which I thought was interesting. I read some of what she wrote to you, and she was describing Canada, and maybe you have that in front of you. She really was talking about kind of the bad trends you're really seeing in that country. And before you mention any of that, if you want to, I actually had someone from Canada who commented on one of my videos where I was talking about some of this, and they said they were kind of offended. And they were like, you guys in the US have your own problems you should be dealing with. And it's like, yeah, you're right. And we don't mean to say Canada's worse, because the US definitely has problems too. So we just want to make sure everybody knows that. But the fact is that countries in the West in general are headed toward these trends that we're talking about. It's not just Canada. But what are some of the things that she mentioned? Go ahead.
And I think also, yes, U.S. has enough of its own problems. You're 100% correct. I remember reading the comment. The only thing is, Canada sits right on top of us. It's right on top of us. So if this happens in Canada, there's no reason to believe that it would not happen in the United States. And the same thing is true here in the United States. Some of the craziness that happens here, Canadians should be building a wall too sometimes. Like keep you crazy Yankees out of here. So I think we're all in this boat together. So we can't just say, oh, well, that's in Canada, so we don't care, or that's the United States, we don't care. Same thing with Latin America, Mexico. No, we care because that does impact us. It does impact us in many ways. And then even greater than all that, these are our brothers and sisters in Christ. And these are people in the faith, our family. I'm concerned about our family being mistreated and not being properly given the rights that they have in their country being taken away and being mistreated. So
yeah. Let me just say too, Jason, that I'm only like an hour and 45 minutes away from Canada, where I live. So we're practically Canada definitely affects us. I got to tell you, that's true. One time they had fires up in Canada, and we could see a haze here where I live in New Hampshire, all the way from Canada. So you're absolutely right. Canada is affecting us.
There you go. So it does affect us.
Canadian air, like you said. But there's a lot of great things about Canada and all of our countries. It's not because we dislike them, it's because we care about them. And I'm sure that's where Pastor Coates, James Coates, and his wife Erin are coming from. They love their country. They care about their country. And so they're just concerned at seeing the changes that are taking place, the freedoms that are being lost. And I think a lot of us could agree, like, some of the stuff we're seeing wouldn't have happened probably 20 years ago.
No,
It's just not being handled the same way that it would have been in the past, especially concerning churches and the respect for churches. It used to be, there was so much respect for churches, and people tended to say, okay, we need to give protections to those churches. And we're really seeing that erode over time. Even people that are complaining more and more about churches having tax exempt status, there's a lot of complaints. All right, I haven't looked at the comments for a little while, but I do see another greetings there from Dake or Dak O'Brien. So hello to another commenter. And if you have any questions you want us to answer, if you have difficult questions, make sure you ask Jason. But if you just had anything you want to add to the conversation, we are reading your comments. So, and Jason's even responding, I think. So that's good.
I'm doing my best. So I do want to comment, sticking with James' court case. His wife mentioned that they have an injunction going on, and going in to get their facility back, and hopefully they'll be heard before the judge's ruling on June 7th. So June 7th is when they'll hear whether or not, and I'm actually going to read that exactly what she said, whether or not James violated the law or broke the law by having church. But they're hoping that they'll get an injunction back. They'll be able to get their property back before then. So, and she further wrote, this week's case was adjourned, and we talked about that before. The judge will look at the evidence put forth yesterday and Monday and make a ruling whether it was a charter violation. After June 7th, the second part of the case should take place, and that's a date to be announced. This is where the government has to produce evidence for the lockdowns, as well as numbers of people who have been harmed in their actions. They will try to get out of this, and they've already tried twice to drop the charges so that they don't have to produce their evidence. This is where our government gets shady and will likely try to step in and sway the judge to drop the charges so that they don't have to be held accountable. And it actually kind of intrigued me, because that's something that we actually heard kind of in California. When they were pushed to produce their numbers, all of a sudden, California said, you know what, y'all going back over there and worship, y'all going to sing. So hopefully the same thing will happen in Canada, because if you can't show the numbers, I mean, the numbers are what's going to make your case. And it just seems like they don't have that in their back pocket or to support them.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing correctly, they do have a lot of the same rights that we have here. One thing, though, that did change here, we have to admit, it actually shifted when the makeup of the Supreme Court changed. That actually changed even the case in California. It changed the situation because California was kind of forced to abide by what the Supreme Court ruled. And before Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, they were tending to side more in favor of the government. And then after she was replaced, they were siding more in favor of churches. So I'm curious what the specifics are in Canada, in terms of some of those higher up aspects of, how those things are decided in their courts. I'm sure James's case in particular is going to have a big bearing, a great bearing on how everything kind of ultimately, the direction things go. One good thing, though, is that I think as the summer comes on, it's kind of good that the judge is giving more time to the case to decide it, because as the summer goes on, probably those numbers are going to go down, right? Absolutely. And so that'll help, like you just said, if the numbers aren't there to prove the government's case, then, they're going to err on the side of religious freedom, I would hope.
We can hope.
Yeah. You never know for sure.
That we don't.
Speaking of that, we are going to talk in a little bit about Pastor Pawlowski, who grew up in a communist situation where he did not have a lot of freedom, and he's in Canada as well. But he's not in Edmonton. I'm trying to remember now. someone in the chat can remind us, but he's in a different part of Canada.
Right.
And he's also been dealing with the local authorities there. The police actually came into his building one day, and health officials, and it was around Easter time.
Yep.
And he kicked them out of his, well, I think it was a Saturday. I think it was a Saturday. It may have been. It could have been a Saturday service too, as part of the Easter, if I remember correctly. But all that aside, the point is, it was right around Easter time, and they came in, and he told them they had to get out. They needed to have a warrant if they were going to be on his property and disrupting his services. So he kicked them out. But it sounds, and we'll get to that specifically, but it sounds like that situation is a kind of a powder keg too. So is there anything else you want to mention about your interaction with Pastor Coates' wife, Erin?
Well, she gave me a good summary of, what's the tenor of Canada. Tell me about it. What's Canada like? And she gave me her honest opinion that Canada is a very dark nation. They have socialist leanings, and it's extremely difficult to find sound churches. We live in a city of 1.3 million, and there are just a handful of faithful gospel preaching churches. Almost all of them have followed the restrictions. Sin is rampant. And I do want to say, following the COVID restrictions is not necessarily meaning that they're bad or that they've sold out or anything like that. And I didn't get that vibe from her at all. But she did say that most of them did follow the COVID restrictions. Sin is rampant. CRT is entrenched in their government and their judicial system, as well as even the police system. Abortions are free in California, and there are no laws related to it. I thought this was interesting. Prostitution is legal in Canada if you have a permit. She called it a ticket, but I did a little looking up. It's like a permit that you can have to be a prostitute. They have an opiate crisis, and suicide and opiates are the number one and number two killers of youth in Canada. And now they're starting to censor online, and they're facing a bill that will jail pastors for up to 5 years if they counsel children or parents of children who want to have a sex change. And now they're killing people, and people are being harmed by the lockdowns. So it is very similar to the US. It's just sad to see it all just kind of compressed into one long paragraph. Like, wow, that is true. But
yeah.
So that was the end of that, I believe.
Okay. And I will mention, kind of in follow-up to that too, someone here, Paul, mentioned about the UK, and that, he agrees. He thinks churches in the West in general are under attack. And one of the specific things he's mentioning is conversion therapy. That's a really good point, that is going to be a real, that's going to be a real controversial aspect to what's happening in our culture. We saw it happen recently in London, where a pastor was preaching on biblical marriage, and then people complained, and he actually was arrested for basically, giving a biblical view of marriage between a man and a woman. So yeah, definitely, Paul, we see that's going to be a big issue is the LGBT. And, if you have a biblical understanding and view of those things, it's going to create more conflict down the road. And we're already starting to see it. So the one other thing that we wanted to talk about, though, and it kind of ties all together with what we're talking about, is a guy who experienced churches that were under attack. Yeah. He grew up in communist, back when Poland was under a communist regime, and it was Pastor Pawlowski. And he was the one we just mentioned earlier, actually kicked police out of his church around Easter time because he experienced government oppression in his youth. And even he talked about, I think, pastors being killed in some cases. So it's really scary, the experience he had. And so now you can give the specifics on what Erin said. I mean, the one thing that stuck out to me is she said that he isn't going down without a fight.
Yeah. So,
which doesn't surprise me.
So our conversation, we were, I just asked, do you know about Pastor Pawlowski? I said that, Tim and I have also discussed Pastor Pawlowski on the show. He seems to have a totally different approach to the government than James and GraceLife as it relates to taking their property. And she said, real basically, he definitely does, but his facility will likely be stolen on May 7th. So I don't know how that works. I don't know what the plan is. I don't know what she knows. I didn't ask her to dig in and like tell me all your details, all your sources. So I guess if we look up tomorrow and we see that Pastor Pulaski, I forgot the proper name of his church, but if the church that Pastor Pulaski is a pastor of is fenced in or barred off or whatever, we know she was right. So
yeah, she might be good. She might be going based on their experience, just knowing how the government handles these things, based on their experience at GraceLife. They gave them warnings. If they didn't comply, then ultimately they kicked them out of their building. And so she might just be saying that's where it's kind of headed with him as well. But she was also saying he's not going down without a fight. He's obviously willing to confront things, right?
And if you've watched those two videos, and I actually watched a couple of videos of him street preaching, because I wanted to understand why was it when you watched one of the videos, the woman talks about how we've talked to you before. She said something that kind of hinted like they have some past. We got some history here between the police and Pastor Pawlowski. So I watched a couple of street preaching videos. I mean, they're fire and brimstone preaching, what you would expect to hear from a street preacher. I have no qualms with that. Nothing wrong. Jason approves of it. But when you factor in also his history, he knows what it's like to be in a system where the government is overstepping their rights and responsibilities and going well above and beyond. So yeah, he's fiery. Yeah, he's got bravado. Okay, I'm not gonna shoot that down at all. Nope, not even a little bit. And knowing his past, knowing where he's come from, you know what? I'll give you a buy on that too. So yeah, you call them Nazis, you call them brown shirts. You didn't call them nice words. Okay, I mean you have reason for doing so. And by the way, they're not behaving. They're behaving pretty much like what you're describing. So there's a reason, and you're giving them reason. So
yeah, I think when someone's gone through a traumatic experience like that, it is definitely going to shape how they look at their present situation. And the truth is, things a lot of times they don't go right from good to bad. They kind of degrade into bad.
yes.
And right. And so I think that's what he's pointing out. It's like, this is how we get to the state that I was under in Poland, is we give up our rights little by little. And then next thing you know, your rights have been confiscated essentially. And so he sees some real dark clouds on the horizon. That's why he's taking the stand. By the way, we do have someone, Trevor from South Africa, who sends his greetings. So this is a very international group we've got here, Jason. And I'm curious, over in South Africa, how things are going in terms of the culture there and religious freedom, the topics that we're discussing tonight. If anybody wants to comment on how things are going in South Africa, that'd be interesting to hear. And any other places that you live. Here in the United States, we kind of generally have a certain situation we're dealing with, but where I live in New Hampshire is one of the best places as far as freedom. Our motto here is live free or die. That's actually the state motto. Yeah. And our state house passed a bill. I think it still needs to pass the Senate, but the state house passed a bill to protect religious institutions. If there's any kind of future situation like what we're going through, the government cannot prohibit churches from using their buildings. They can't tell a church or a religious institution, you have to close your building down. So that's really good news, but that's our state making that decision. Jason, you live in Atlanta. Georgia. Of course, Georgia is the most peaceful place in the United States. There's no controversy there.
Sunshine and rainbows here, man. Just sunshine and rainbows. We have not passed anything similar to that, but I hate to say it, Georgians didn't really. They just decided they're going to do what they're going to do. And
that's true.
Now we did lock down in the beginning, but once it became clear and evident, like, wait, hold on, what? I'll just say it, like Georgia just decided they were going to be open 5 weeks in. So some people were still at home, and my kids were still at home for a good part of it, but for the most part, Georgia was getting real open. So, but we have not signed bills and instituted practices that say things like churches can stay open. So I don't know. Prayerfully, hopefully we'll never have anything like this again. But I don't know what would happen if we did have another situation like this. But I can pretty much guarantee you it will not go over as easily as it did back in March, April of 2020. So
unfortunately, things never happen quite the same way twice. And so probably next time something like this happens, it'll be from a slightly different direction, but it'll still be an issue of whether the government is overstepping its bounds. And our freedoms in this country, they are written in our Constitution. I mean, we have amendments to the Constitution saying these are your rights. They're not just privileges, they're rights, and you have the right to freely practice your religion. So hopefully our government will uphold that. And that's something we've talked about a lot. We're supposed to be a government that follows, it's supposed to be under its own laws, really. So I like this comment we got from Paul saying that one thing we have in our armory that the world does not have is prayer. And that's a great thing to mention today because it is the National Day of Prayer here.
it is.
So I want to mention that to all of you. And definitely, we've already said it. We should be praying for the Coates, praying for Pastor Pawlowski, praying for our countries, praying for one another. So thank you for that comment, Paul. That's such a great point. And what an encouragement. We're going to wrap things up soon here. Really enjoyed doing this live and getting a little bit of interaction from our audience. If you liked this, tell other people. We'll let you know when we're going to do this again, and get some more people to join us so that we can interact with these comments. But Jason wanted to do a little segment here at the end called "What Are You Reading?" So I'm going to let Jason take the stage tonight on that, and Jason's going to tell us what he's reading. This segment is just to share with you things that we're reading that might be good resources for people in our audience. It's just to kind of let you know things that we're going through that you might want to know about. So go ahead, Jason. What are you reading?
All right. Well, this is a segment, the end of our show, we're going to start calling it, "Hey, what are you reading?" So I'm currently finishing up The Mortification of Sin by John Owen. And he makes a fantastic case. John Owen is a Puritan pastor from the late 1600s. And he makes this wonderful case that we should be aggressively surrendering our sinful natures over to God, the Holy Spirit, to prune, to cut, to trim away anything that resembles sin in our lives. You'll never be without sin in life, but you can at least be making the attempt to mortify it, as he says, and put it to death every day. So if you have that lustful thought, you're not just ignoring it, but you're being mindful and asking God to dig that out so that it doesn't become something worse. And I think he makes a fantastic case. It's a short book. It's a little under 125 pages and well worth your read. So that's what I'm reading. The Mortification of Sin by John Owen.
Okay. That sounds like light reading.
It's not even in this.
You're talking about a Puritan. So probably all Jason's books are going to be. I'll try to come up with books that are a lot easier, for the rest of us.
Oh, come on, man.
Yeah.
Don't do that to me. Don't do it to me.
It's okay. It's okay. we get variety. You know, I'm sure you have some books that you read that are not Puritan, super deep reading, and
I got
you
one or
have a
two.
variety. Yeah.
I got this book, God Matters. I mean, that was pretty. I mean,
Oh yeah.
the guy that wrote it, I mean, he wears two hats. I don't understand why he wears two hats, but that's a whole other
Well,
thing there.
I've told Jason. I'm just gonna confess. We're wrapping up here. I do want to thank RZ said, "Love you guys. Thank you for this. Thank you for commenting, RZ. I'm glad to see people are receiving this well. But I'm just going to say, kind of in closing here, I am wearing this Toronto Blue Jays hat. I really like this hat a lot, and it ties into Canada, which we've been talking about. But underneath, I have another cap because this hat's a little big, and it kind of fits nicely over my cap. But I got to show you, Jason.
Go ahead, fess up.
Here it is again. I am I'm a Phillies fan, so I can't help it.
What in the world?
Well, thank you, Jason. This was really good. And thank you, everybody who joined us tonight, people from different countries. That's really awesome.
All over the place.
We did this at 6:00. So for people on the West Coast of the United States, that's a little tough. If you just want to leave work early next time, right, Jason? They could just leave work, come and join us. We give you permission.
Tim, I thought you said you were going to write them an excuse to get out of work.
Yeah, I'll let you do that. But the good thing about doing it at this time is even people that are in UK and even South Africa, that surprises me.
Wow.
I wonder what time it is in South Africa. Pretty late in the night or early morning, I would think.
I would think it's, I don't know.
What time is it over there? All right. Well, Jason, we'll wrap up here, but
did you see what James just wrote? Did you just see?
No.
I thought that was a joke. I've heard this.
Oh, wow. There's a church in Waterloo, Canada, that has been fined tens of millions, Trinity Bible Chapel. So yeah, we'll have to look that up. That's a lot of money. Unless that church is very wealthy, I would think that's an amount in fines that would be hard to ever come up with. Wow.
Yeah. Well,
all right. We'll look at that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm glad that people enjoyed this, and we'll do it again. Jason, thank you so much again, as always, for joining me and keeping these discussions interesting.
Hey, thank you for having me, my friend. And I'll talk to you again soon.